Party House is just an incredible game. You've got 25 days to throw the ultimate party. You open the door of your house, and a random friend from your deck shows up. It's like hitting in blackjack. They give you resources to make your deck and your house better, but you can only cash out if your party is safe. See, you're friends with these troublemakers, and if 3 of them show up, the cops get called, and you'll lose that valuable day. No value gained. So there's this push your luck component that I think is really fun and addicting. I put in 90 hours and got a 77 win streak in the random mode. I think Party House is pretty comparable to Balatro, which is a $10 roguelike deck builder and the best indie game of 2025. Hearing all this, it might surprise you to hear that Party House is not only just as good as Balatro in my opinion, but it's also bundled with 49 other top-notch games, all for the very low price of $25. That's right, the best game of 2024, in my opinion, is finally physical. I'm celebrating UFO 50 by showing you just how much value there is. If these 50 games were released on Steam, how much money could the developer charge? I'm going to keep it going with heavy hitters, and just to be clear, I don't think that this is a tier list in terms of quality. I'm basically just ranking how much money these games could charge. So if you're somebody who really likes, the scope of a $1 mobile game, you might actually find those games to be more fun than the $10 games, and in that case, you're going to find UFO 50 to be even more value than I do. So as we said, let's throw Party House up in the $10 tier. Now, Mini and Max is possibly the most well-regarded game in the entirety of UFO 50, and it's really not hard to see why. It's an adventure platformer, but it's not a Metroidvania, which means there's really not a lot of games that I can give a direct comparison to. Funny enough, it's kind of a spiritual sequel to Party House in that you've got an older sister who's trying to throw a rager, and you're just like her dumb little kid sister that she locks in the closet so that you don't embarrass her in front of her cool high school friends. So what do you and your dog Max do? Well, you've got the power of imagination to shrink yourself. And even though you're just entirely in the closet throughout the game, depending on where you shrink down and use your imagination, you're going to find all sorts of biomes, plus a lot of other throwbacks to other UFO 50 games. I really don't want to spoil too much here, but some really exciting stuff happens, really mind-melting, awesome things. The game is so genuinely unique, and if you can think of anything that's very similar, let me know in the comments. The best that I can say is it's like Super Mario Bros. 2, the US one, maybe with like grounded DNA inside of it, because you shrink. And that's about it. That's not even a great comparison. As you'll find out, a lot of UFO 50 games do have a shared DNA with other genres, but they're really throwing their own twist in it, which is so exciting and cool. So yeah, Mini and Max, easily a $10 game. The value is just immense. Mortol is one of my all-time favorites on UFO 50. This is a true puzzle platformer in that it is both truly a puzzle and it is both truly a platformer. Both sides are basically equal. You're going to start your campaign with 25 little mortals, and all of your guys are totally expendable. They can blow up, they can turn into stone, or they can shoot themselves like an arrow. The way levels are designed, you might have to jump on the dead bodies of other mortals, or you may need to try and blow up as many enemies as you can because killing 3 enemies gives you a 1 life rebate, and as you can tell, your life total is really important. When you beat levels, you don't go back to 25, you basically get a plus or a minus depending on how many lives you spent. You can spend tons of times optimizing here because revisiting an old level and using some of your newer knowledge can let you have cascading effects throughout the rest of your campaign. There are so many different ways to beat each level that it really is up to you and your sense of puzzle solving. There might be a solution that takes only 3 lives, or you might just be down to throw like 10 lives at the problem and just like kill whatever's in front of you. One final point too, the game is just hysterical. There's something so funny about watching these little guys die to basically any little gust of wind. I do think this is possibly an $8 banger, but I'm showing my bias here. I think that Mortol has the chops to be a $10 game. I would certainly pay $10 for it, and I think Northern Lion would too. This was a game that he absolutely loved. Now, Golfaria is maybe a little polarizing here, but I want to share a bit of my thoughts on it. It's an exploration-based Metroidvania of sorts in that you are getting power-ups and those will help you unlock new areas, but it's really unique in that you are literally a golf ball. So you are basically hitting yourself with an invisible putter It's a lot like pinball in that you can ricochet off walls and bumpers and whatnot, but that really matters because you only have a certain number of strokes for each of your quote-unquote lives, I guess you could say. I know a lot of players find this kind of frustrating because maybe they made progress in a certain direction, but then they've run out of their strokes and so they have to go back to the checkpoint. But I think Golfaria is really well done in that every single run feels really thrilling and unique. And the game is really generous with both checkpoints and hidden abilities and equipment to make your stroke count so much better. I also fell in love with the lore of this game and have definitely considered making a lore attempt for Golfaria of all things. The game most comparable to it is probably Golf Story, which is about a $15 game on the Nintendo eShop. But I also think it's got a lot of Blueprints DNA, which if you've been following our channel, you know that we absolutely love Blueprints. And that's because both of these games have a built-in timer to how much you can explore in any given session. And that's not to the detriment of it. I think both Blueprints and Golfaria are playing with a really unique space here that if you're not just like a little baby and you can handle, having to constantly explore in new directions, I think you'll really enjoy Golfaria, and I think you'll agree with me that this has the content needed to be a $10 game and the unique chops as well. Grimstone is basically Final Fantasy I on the NES, which is a much better game than I think people might give it credit for. I know if you're going to talk about favorite FFs, most people are going to say 10 or 8 or Tactics. I mean, that's what I would say for my top 3. Most people would probably say 7. But all about to say, Grimstone is NES style. It's extremely unique because 1, it's got the Western setting, which I guess like Wild Arms is a Western JRPG, but that's got a little bit more of a Japanese flavor. Anyway, Grimstone truly feels Western, and like Final Fantasy I, you choose your 4 party members, and these are hard lock classes that you're going to play with for the entirety of your campaign. I think there's 8 or 9 choices, which means you could have a second playthrough of Grimstone and have an entirely different experience than the first. Combat has some Undertale DNA to it, and that you've got this sliding timer that can help with your guns and your shots. And that gets played with in really clever ways too. Like when you get blinded, you no longer see the reticle, but if you're skilled enough to know the general timing of your attacks, you can still pull off a lot of damage. I actually think Grimstone might just be better than Final Fantasy I, which again, I think is a pretty underrated game, and it's been remade a million times with a bunch of HD skins. So based on that, I think Grimstone is easily a $10 game. The amount of content and the amount of time that you get out of this single game is incredible. So if you compare it to all of these HD remasters or whatever, Grimstone is easily a $10 game, and I swear to you, the campaign is like 8 to 10 hours long, possibly longer. There's so many secrets to discover too, so this truly is a fully fledged turn-based RPG in the UFO 50 ecosystem. Porgy is highly comparable to Dave the Diver, and honestly, I think Porgy is just better than Dave the Diver. You control a submarine with limited oxygen, and at first, you can barely spend any amount of time underwater. You've just got this pathetic little pea shooter as well, but as you explore, you find tons of upgrades that let you dive for a longer time. You can have up to 2 different items equipped for combat or exploration. The mood of this game is so good, the music's fantastic, and I love the tension of exploring versus making it safely back to the surface to save all the progress you made. Of course, if you die down below, nothing that you pick up is going to stay with you. When I first played Dave the Diver, this was the component that I liked the most about it, the push your luck aspect, but I found that Dave the Diver, the longer it went, just kind of dragged on and really went away with this tension, where Porgy never does. Possibly to its detriment, because the final level of Porgy is very difficult and there is not a lot of wiggle room to explore with your oxygen, but I genuinely loved every minute of this experience. It is such a $10 game, and I think that it is absolutely worth your time. And actually, I just want to pause really quick and say, by my count, we now have 6 games that are worth $10 each. $60 is basically a AAA game in this day and age, and we've already more than doubled the $25 price that UFO 50 is. So yeah, we're already way in the money here, and there are 44 other games to cover. Fantastic. Valbrace is a fantasy RPG. It is a lot like if a first-person dungeon crawler like Etrian Odyssey or old Shin Megami Tensei games were mixed with Punch-Out on the NES or Super Nintendo. The closest comparison on Steam I can find is Legend of Grimrock, which is a $15 game. And unlike that, Valbrace never overstays its welcome. It's extremely satisfying to learn enemy patterns. It's always fun to be in combat because you've got to be on your toes. It's real-time battling. Your weapon choices feel really distinct, whether it's a spear or a short sword or long sword. You can also specialize in different stats too, like magic, which is a really awesome system. You find different runes as you explore. Some are useful in battle, others help outside of combat, and you only have so much time to input them, which adds tension and encourages magic builds to be a little bit more different than swinging your sword or shielding. This game is super cool. It has more depth and content than you might expect, and it is easily a $10 indie gem. The last in this tier, in my opinion, is Night Manor, which feels a lot like Maniac Mansion on the NES. It's got that horror point-and-click kind of vibe to it, and I played it with the lights off like you're supposed to play horror games, and I gotta tell you that I freaked out way more than an 8-bit game had any right to make me feel. It's really just the atmosphere and the music in particular that adds so much tension to this game. Also, the opening cinematic is genuinely great, and the same is true of all the story-related stuff. This is a game that really impresses, especially due to its technical limitations. All right, next up is Vainger, which is a true Metroidvania in that it is a lot like Metroid. As far as games on Steam goes, I'd compare it to Environmental Station Alpha, which is like a $7 game, Axiom Verge, which is a ton of fun. And even compared to those, Vainger has its own flavor because there's this warping of gravity. You're constantly going up and down, which can lead to fun puzzles as well as really interesting combat with bosses. I also love the way you mix and match your equipment because you assign them to certain slots. So if you've got like a fire power-up, do you put it on your blaster? Do you put it on your armor? Those are very impactful choices while also being really simple. Most Metroidvanias are pretty expensive, but because Vainger is in the Metroid style of being able to finish this game really quickly, I think that an $8 tier is a little bit more fair. And honestly, rather than calling this tier bangers, these are some bangers for sure. Warp Tank is very similar to Vainger in that it is also about manipulating gravity. However, this game leans way more into puzzles. It is honestly a vibe. Even the overworld itself is its own puzzle of how do you get to different levels. The warping mechanic is way deeper than it looks. The later biomes escalate the tension in a really cool and palpable way. And the bosses are surprisingly challenging. There is a lot more content than you might expect too. I think you could make an argument for it being $10, but let's throw Warp Tank in the $8 tier and call it a coffee-filled, fantastic playthrough. Also, I don't know that you can really compare Warp Tank to any other game on Steam. This is another one I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section on. Between the puzzle solving and the atmosphere, there really just isn't anything quite like it other than maybe Vainger, which is another UFO 50 game. Very cool stuff. Now, Rakshasa definitely does have some DNA, and that is Ghosts and Goblins, the classic game from Capcom. Both of these games have similar jumping. You've got enemies that flood you from not just the right side, but also the left. And there is a big focus on weapon power-ups. There are two major twists with Rakshasa, though. One is that this game has a decidedly Hindu/Buddhist mythology slant to it, which I find to be very unique. Unless you're playing Shin Megami Tensei, you're basically never exploring that kind of mythology, which is really cool. The second is you have infinite lives, sort of. When you die in Rakshasa, which by the way occurs with any hit whatsoever, you enter the spiritual plane. If you can connect your spirit with the targets, you will revive, but you'll get a little skull underneath your score. And the more skulls you accumulate, the harder enemies in the level will be, and the more challenging it is to restore your spirit to your body. If you touch any enemy in the spirit plane, that is a hard game over. This game is brutally difficult, but I always felt like it was a fair challenge, and getting better at this game was one of my favorite experiences in the entire UFO 50 playthrough. It is a solid $8 game. Divers is another turn-based RPG, a lot like Grimstone is. However, this is significantly scaled back and stripped down. You control 3 identical crocodile brothers, I think they're brothers, and their inventory is limited to what they can physically hold in their hands. There is a weapon triangle, and there's tension about how long should you stay underwater before resurfacing to heal and save, just like Porgy does. The difference is Porgy had a genuine timer with oxygen, while Divers has durability with its weapons, so eventually you just won't be able to attack anymore. However, the durability does reset when you go back to the surface. To be honest, there were times when I really hated Divers. It can feel extremely unfair. It's also very cryptic, like a lot of other UFO 50 games, but it took me a really long time to figure out what elements beat each other or what resources were worth farming. But the lonely mood is extremely unique. I loved uncovering secrets. The world is so big and sprawling. And so if you enjoy a good turn-based RPG, you don't mind the brutal difficulty of like a Shin Megami Tensei, you're gonna really really dig Divers. It does not have the content that Grimstone does, in my opinion, but it's playing in a different space by being scaled back, and it's really great at an $8 tier. Rock on Island is UFO 50's tower defense game. It's very comparable to Bloons TD, which is about a $15 game. This game is a lot shorter, but there's still a lot of depth. I love strategizing about which cavemen to place on each of the game's very different level landscapes. It felt like every single upgrade was useful in some capacity. I also love that you, as the player, can throw your own bones to deal damage. I feel like most tower defense games, you're just this sort of omnipotent hand, but in Rock on Island, you are physically there, albeit very slow, and one of the better strategies is to upgrade your own bones and weapons because you have a lot of control over how to spread your damage out. Considering the price of Bloons TD and the fun challenge of getting a cherry on this game, Rock on Island is definitely an $8 Vainger. Okay, Rail Heist definitely defies comparisons. The closest I could think of is something like Hotline Miami, in that you are trying to plan out a perfect run where if you die once, the whole thing resets. It's also a lot like Mark of the Ninja or SteamWorld Heist. In this game, you are outlaws trying to steal money on a train, and every single mission is about planning that perfect route. And it gets interesting when enemies spot you, because now it becomes a pseudo turn-based system where you alternate with the enemy computer over who gets to move for how long. If they ever see you on their turn, they'll shoot you and kill you instantly. Bullets aren't little pea shots like a lot of other video games. This is way more realistic. The cool thing is you can disarm, stun, or even outright kill the enemies themselves. You can even pull out your own gun, but that takes quite a lot of time, which creates this really cool tension based off of what position you're in. There's a huge difference between the enemy knowing you're there and not knowing you're there. Considering Hotline Miami is a $10 game that is admittedly often discounted, I think Rail Heist is very safe in the $8 tier, and the amount of missions that you get is pretty substantial. Avianos is just basically a full-on board game, which has so many analogs on Steam, but none quite like this game. You are, of course, managing resources, but your actions in the game are determined by praying to a dinosaur god. There's maybe 5 or 6 of them, and the interesting thing too is your opponent also plays by picking gods. You can't pick the same one twice in a row, and you can't pick the same one that the opponent just picked, so there's naturally going to be a lot of different diversity with your actions, and you can even level them up, which is extremely fun. The best part about Avianos is the actual assembling of your army. These are all really mofo and little birds. They can be knights, they can be wizards, or hummingbird bombers. And watching these birds go to war is honestly just hilarious. But even more than that, it is highly tactical. I love that if you have a castle and you know that you're gonna die to the opponent's force, you can destroy the precious resources that you built on it so that even if your opponent has the castle, they're not gonna benefit from all the things that you built. There's even full-on PvP, which is genuinely fun, and Avianos has a ton of content baked within it as well. Absolutely an $8 Vainger. Cyber Owls is an extremely cool genre blend because it's one part Contra, it's another part Hogan's Alley, it's another part Metal Gear on the NES. And the way it makes this possible is each of the 4 owls has this unique playstyle built into them on their unique mission. Cool twist too is that if one of your owls fails their mission, they get captured and thrown in jail, and then when you send out another owl to rescue them, they play a minigame. The actions they can take on that board are the same as their own abilities. It's a really fascinating genre blend. The scenario is so cool. The owls are all just really badass, and it is a total Vainger. Honestly, possibly $10. I might be being a little too mean to these cool little birds. Lords of Diskonia is very comparable to an indie game called Flickshot Rogues that came out last year, and Lords of Diskonia came out first, which is even crazier to think about compared to a $15 game. Lords of Diskonia feels like a tabletop board game. You flick your disc characters across the board, they can ricochet off objects, you can push them into water, stun them, poison them. All these discs have different stats because they can either be small and agile, moving lots of times, or they can be massive, deal huge damage, but only move once. I never played Pogs in school, I was a little too young for that, but this is probably the best simulation of that I can think of, or perhaps Beyblade in a weird way. I do think that missions can drag on a little long, but it is cool that even if you lose a major battle, you can still scrape together a comeback based off of your own strategies. And at half the price of Flickshot trickshot rogues, Lords of Diskonia is an absolute steal at $8. The final $8 game, in my opinion, is Mooncat, which is such a special game. Even if you've never played UFO 50, there's a very good chance that you've heard of it. It is so difficult to explain the controls. You definitely don't move normally. You only have left and right inputs, but you can combine and hold them in different ways to make a whole array of different actions that you will naturally explore as you play this game. It's a true platformer, though there are plenty of secrets, and I don't think that there is any game that's comparable, like maybe Oddworld, but that is such a huge stretch. And I know I'm often bringing up the vibe of UFO 50 games, but I think that Mooncat is the vibe of this entire collection. That's why I'm so thrilled that UFO 50 is finally physical. I am so excited by the idea of my physical companion to get just a little bit more out of a game that has already inspired me with its dreamlike ethereal qualities. And I should also say there is a 2-player mode that is good for a barrel of laughs. Mooncat's just something else. AtTactics has some auto-battler DNA to it, but it's truly a real-time tactics game. The closest I can compare to on Steam is Tooth and Nail or Bad North, but maybe even more comparable is just Speed Chess. You have a limited amount of time to place your units, to make moves. You've got to send your units to the opponent's side, but things can get really messy really fast, but that's what makes it fun. Unlike most tactics games, there is a genuine PvP component to this because both players are not being able to operate under the most optimal circumstances. There's tons of trickery and there's tons of micro decisions that can lead to victories, though I will say it can get a little intense. I think Bug Hunter is kind of like Into the Breach, or in a weird way, like 868 Hack, the roguelike game. More than anything else, it's a turn-based quote-unquote deck system, but I put that in quotes because your deck doesn't persist. Every single mission, you're building from scratch. Your goal is to kill the enemies using a very limited amount of actions and movement, and so each mission becomes this puzzle of how do you optimally kill everything before enemies spiral out of control. And believe me, they will. If you don't kill enemies on the screen, they evolve and grow and get really nasty abilities. There's tons of clever mechanics like jumping onto enemies to squash them, which can mean that your movements are actually kills. Or the energy cubes that can fuel your ability to buy better power-ups. Well, you can also just shoot them, and that will detonate like a grenade to kill enemies all around it. The flexibility is just a ton of fun. I'm pretty down to give it another whirl because I think it's a solid $5 budget. So I don't actually know how to pronounce this next game. I've always called it Caramel, but I'm thinking now it might be like Potato, Caramel. Regardless of what you call it, it is a shoot 'em up in the style of Gradius, and it's got co-op that I think is really well integrated into the story of the game. The unique mechanic here is a camera. You can take photos of enemies to freeze them in place and rack up a huge high score, or you can use your camera to possibly unlock secrets depending on where you take pictures in suspicious places. Because the game is so hard, I think co-op is almost required, and it's a lot of fun between a second player balancing your camera shots, racking up points in interesting ways. There's only a handful of worlds, but they're all very substantial. And frankly, the game is just a blast, though I still have not quite figured out how to get the cherry for it. I think it's an easy $5 game. Overbold is a lot like an old retro game you've probably never heard of called Smash TV. The indie game that you've certainly heard of is Enter the Gungeon, though, and between these two, it's a ton of fun. You are fighting waves and waves of enemies inside of a cramped space. By winning, you earn money, which can help you buy upgrades, but you can also forcibly add more enemies to your next mission, which will give you even bigger rewards. It's a great push your luck mechanic. Skilled players can take on lots of waves early, while others might play it more safe and want to build up gradually, but you really need to upgrade at some point because the final mission and later waves in particular just get so brutal in a way that I do think is very fair. I've spent more time on Overbold than I probably should have, but that's because I'm greedy. I keep thinking I'm skilled enough to take on 4 or 5 waves in the early missions, and sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. It really does depend on the enemies, knowing their AI, and just playing as best as you can. For such a simple package, Overbold is extremely fun. Next up is Block Koala, which is the Sokoban of UFO 50. There are so many Sokobans out there, but Block Koala's got 50 different levels, and it's got a build-your-own-level generator. The overall story is very cute. It kind of feels like an old mascot of a fast food place that you're finally getting to play with. And even if I'm not the biggest fan of Sokoban puzzle games, the amount of content is very undeniable. I think it's an easy pickup at a $5 tier. It's funny that I'm talking about Campanella 2 before Campanella 1. Thankfully, these games are very different, but not so thankfully, this game is extremely punishing. I wish that there were more ways to heal in between levels. It kind of feels like those old NES games where difficulty is used to artificially extend the runtime, like Ninja Gaiden. That being said, I do like flying the ship. The run and gun sections are really fun, refreshing, and unique. There's lots of branching paths. The fuel management is some interesting tension. But man, I just cannot beat this game to save my life. I won't deny that it's a $5 game, but hoo-wee, you've got to really be a masochist to love this game. Next up is Bushido Ball, which is a 1v1 fighter game that's disguised as a sports game. The closest comparison is Windjammers, that old arcade game where you're throwing a frisbee at each other, or maybe Lethal League, which is an old game that still has a lot of value on Steam. Based off that, I think Bushido Ball could be worth more than $5, but I'm being pretty conservative. I think the concept is really strong. All of the characters play very differently. They've got a different sort of feudal Japanese style to them. I will say, as far as PvP goes, which is the main reason to play this game, Raizo is just a little bit too strong, but I think if you ban him and just focus on the others, or heck, focus on mastering one of them yourself, you'll have such a fun time. And despite there only being 2 buttons in this game, there are a lot of control options, like holding backward to lob the ball up in the air, determining the best uses for your special gauge. The depth is real, you just have to ban Raizo. Fist Hell is a beat 'em up, very similar to Streets of Rage, Double Dragon, or the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games. You've got to fight your way through hordes and hordes of zombies and different infected enemies. The 4 different characters have awesome art, very unique playstyles. It's got the co-op that you want. That's really the only way to play a beat 'em up. And for that reason alone, you're gonna have a ton of fun with a $5 pickup. Now, I should say, Fist Hell is not that different than a traditional beat 'em up, but if you love this genre, you're definitely gonna love this game, especially if you have a fondness for 8-bit style graphics. Now, if you thought Campanella 2 was difficult, Onion Delivery is extraordinarily tough. This is a lot like Crazy Taxi, and despite it being an 8-bit game on a wider grid, the controls for driving are more realistic. You can't just do a 180 on a dime, you've got to turn manually. And of course, there's a ton of zaniness on the road, all sorts of obstacles, platforms to leap off into, you got time limits, a regenerating health bar. There is so much charm in the dude that you play as. I get such a kick from his intro cutscene clocking into work, and I especially love his expressions as things become way too chaotic for him on any given day, which I guess is just par for the course in the world of Onion Delivery. I will say, despite being extremely difficult, I don't think I ever made it past mission 3. It could possibly be a $3 game, but I think Onion Delivery does have something really substantial for those who are willing to put in the time and learn how to drive. Hotfoot is pretty cool. It's a 2v2 beanbag dodgeball kind of game. In fact, it's very similar to Super Dodgeball, but it's also got a little bit of, like, I don't know, NBA Jam energy to it. You play with students in a gym who are all unique. They might share certain abilities, but they've all got something a little bit special to them. And that makes it really fun and rewarding to draft different combinations and maybe see some unique dialogue between all the different relationships. I put in a good amount of hours and I feel like it's remarkably balanced, though I'm sure there's probably some really busted combination. You for sure want to play this multiplayer, whether it's co-op or PvP. The big downside though is the 2-button limitation of UFO 50. Because every single game is trying to be authentic to the 8-bit experience, you've only got the D-pad and 2 buttons, and this game absolutely needed a 3rd or a 4th. That's the main reason I think it's more of a $3 game, but the multiplayer is a lot of fun, and so is just drafting. Hey, there's Campanella 1. This is a much more traditional platformer, unlike Campanella 2. You're flying the spaceship through really interesting areas, and it feels surprisingly realistic because of gravity and drag and the way that your fuel engine works. It is challenging at first, but once you improve, you'll find all sorts of secrets and earn extra lives. It is definitely important to find the secret coffee in each level. That gives you a lot of points to help you earn extra lives. You'd think a game where you pilot a spaceship would be all about planets and space, but actually the levels and bosses are extremely imaginative. You're inside of a kitchen or a haunted house and you're trying to score basketballs to beat a boss. Campanella is silly but charming. The closest games I can compare it to are Lunar Lander and Thrust, which are both on Steam. And unlike those games, the dreamlike quality of Campanella really stands out. And guess what? If you master the piloting of this game, there are so many other games on the collection that will benefit from those skills. Kit Club has a lot of Mega Man on the NES DNA to it, although you've got this interesting soccer ball trajectory mechanic that feels kind of like Bubble Bobble. Every single level is just a single room where you've got to defeat all the enemies, but there is a time limit and you do not want to run out. The repetition of these levels means that you can get better and better, which does feel rewarding. Co-op absolutely helps too, because this is pretty challenging. Kit Club is a solid $3 pickup. Oh, Barbuda. This is a game that's a little controversial. You're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. It is the very first game in UFO 50, and it's extremely archaic in its platforming and sound design, but that's on purpose. You could maybe compare it to La Mulana on Steam, which is usually a $3 game, but Barbuda is even more primitive than that. I do find that the puzzle element of managing your resources and following leads is pretty interesting. You can't just farm money in this game. There are some optimal paths, but there's actually a surprising amount of replayability in determining new paths. The content and imagination at work, I think, is more than enough to justify $3. If you could call any aspect of Barbuda a twist, it would probably be the ghostly spirit that kind of follows you, kind of doesn't. The cool thing is, it doesn't just like warp through walls. If you track it on the minimap, you can actually get some hints as to how to progress from some areas to another. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of Barbuda. I actually think it's a little bit more gimmicky compared to the other games because of its forced archaic presentation, but I also know a lot of people who really love it for those exact purposes. I think it's easily $3. The final game in the trilogy, but not the last Campanella game in general, is Campanella 3. This is an arcade survival game. How long can you last while you're blasting enemies? The unique twist here is the foreground and the background layering, and the way that it can recreate that feeling of Mode 7 on the Super Nintendo, kind of like F-Zero or Star Fox, though I think the closest game I'd compare it to is probably Space Harrier. Juggling enemies from both planes is a lot of fun, and I think it's got just enough depth to justify the $3 Virtual Console tag. Next up is Seaside Drive, and I'm realizing that the image between Campanella 3 and Seaside Drive are swapped. That's kind of funny. Like Campanella 3, there is an arcade-style survival aspect to it, but the cool twist here is being in the car means that you've got to manage both your forward momentum and the vertical enemy attacks. Drifting is a huge mechanic which can help you deal with waves and waves of enemies, which also plays with your leverage of momentum. And artistically, the vibes of this game are really something else, and I have no problem putting it at a $3 game. I actually think I might be a little mean to Mortol 2 right here. You know how much I loved Mortol 1. These sequels have a little bit in common in that you've got a huge amount of lives to throw at your campaign, but functionally they play very differently. Now you've got 99 lives and a whole bunch of different job classes, each with different skills and weaknesses, and together you combine your skills to navigate one massive level. Some job classes give you mobility, like warp points or pipes. Others are just pure combat, but I really like how you're setting the stage for more people to come after you. That's a little Expedition 33 for those who come after. If Mortol 1 is like Lemmings, then Mortol 2 is more like the Lost Vikings. It's also kind of similar to the game Trine, however you pronounce that, which is about a $15 game. I think Mortol 2 does have a lot going for it, despite it just being one big level, and I think 3 is pretty fair overall. Okay, Hyper Contender is a lot like Super Smash Bros. Or Rivals of Ether, although it's more like the freeware web version compared to those games. Still, I'm putting it at $3 and not $1 because the game really does have a cool amount of depth. There are so many different characters that you can play from. You're all trying to pick up rings that the game spawns or knock them out of the opponent, kind of like Struggle in Kingdom Hearts 2. And every single player is so different in that even the way that they jump is different. You got a guy who flips gravity like Warp Tank and Vainger. Compare that to the guy who swings around like Spider-Man. I'm sure there is some sort of definitive best character, but in the amount of time that I've played, they all feel really differently, and that makes it a ton of fun to play multiplayer with. And again, that is the reason I think it is a $3 game. Elazar's Hat is a top-down shooter. It does have some co-op gameplay. It's very similar to Pocky and Rocky, which, by the way, has a remastered version on Steam for about $16. One of the twists here is the card power-up system. You'll need at least 3 to give you a different power-up, and they can be rearranged in different ways. The obvious ones are getting 3 of a kind, but the more you experiment, the more you might find interesting and unique power-ups as well. For whatever reason, Elazar's Hat is pretty forgiving compared to other UFO 50 games as well. You can continue where you got a game over, and it's really not that long. So I think overall, $3 is extremely fair. Now, Pilot's Quest is very fascinating. It's one part Zelda-style exploration, and it's one part idle game. Your main base will passively generate resources, but this is not tied to the real-world time. It's tied to you playing other UFO 50 games, which means you can slowly build progress while you enjoy other activities. I will say that the wild area exploration is a bit more shallow on replay, which is something you do have to do in this game, but compared to most idle games, this has a lot more depth and structure to it. I'm not sure which games you can compare Pilot Quest to because of the interesting genre blend, and it is a $3 game. Now, Star Wars Spear is a vertical shooter, a lot like 1942 and maybe Bullet Hell types of games. It's very fast-paced, it's pretty difficult. It also has a letter collecting power-up system that is quite similar to Elazar's hat. It is cool that the different pilots have different abilities as well. I think there's at least $3 worth of content here, though your mileage will vary based on how much you enjoy shoot 'em ups. Okay, Magic Garden is very cool, especially for a really simple arcade-style game. It's kind of like a mashup between a Studio Ghibli aesthetic and, I don't know, the classic game Snake, where you build a chain of things that also makes it more treacherous for you to survive. And that's a huge point here in Magic Garden because everything will kill you, even hitting a wall. As you learn to score lots of points, you get potions on the map, which are kind of like Pac-Man power-ups. As soon as you touch them, you can finally start walking into other enemies, which will not only remove them for a lot of future safety, but also give you a lot of points. And the fun twist on that is that you can stack potion power-ups for bigger multipliers and longer time. That is how you start to rack up insanely high scores, which give this game way more depth and replayability than you would ever expect. I do think it's closer to a $1 mobile game that you would find on the App Store, but don't be fooled, there are a lot of legs to Magic Garden. Quibble Race is really similar in its mobile game vibes, and that's because it is kind of like horse racing. There are so many dollar horse racing games out there. It is a lot of fun sabotaging your opponents, though, and I had a lot of fun raising little guys to start betting on. It feels a lot like Chow Racing from Sonic Adventure 2, which, by the way, I cannot believe Sega's never made a mobile game out of. All that to say, I'm very spoiled because John Perry, who was one of the main developers who made UFO 50, also made a phenomenal real-life board game called Hot Streak, which is kind of like a strictly better version of this idea. If you just consider all the money you save buying UFO 50 for $25, you could also throw maybe $40 to get Hot Streak, the real game, as well. I highly recommend it. And compared to $40, $1 for Quibble Race seems very fair. Planet Zoldath is basically, what if we took Zelda 1 randomizer and just made an entire game out of it? You crash land on a strange planet and you hardly know anything. There's all these weird resources that can be traded in different ways. You've got all these aliens, some of which are friendly, some of which are enemies. And every time you play the game, all these values reset. So you're kind of scrounging on the fly, trying to figure things out. It can be as short or as long as you want it to. I do think speedrunning the game is a pretty fun way to go. And yeah, overall, it's gotta be about $1. Painchase is very similar to Miss Pac-Man in its controls and the way that you move on a maze, but it's a lot like Splatoon in that you are leaving a blue ink trail as you move, and your goal is to fill up the stage with enough blue when time runs out to move on to the next area. There's all these red enemies that are important to kill because they will override your blue paint, and there's also a really innovative power-up system where you painting over it will unlock the ability, which means that normally you only get it once, but if the enemy paints over it, you can paint over it again, so sometimes you do want to let some enemies live. Levels are not randomized, they're all the same in an arcade style, so you can have an optimal path to go, and maybe some players will have a lot of fun with that. There is PvP, it's pretty simple but fun, and I think overall it's a $1 game. Valbrace is extremely similar to the Steam hit Downwell. That game is $3 and it's often discounted as well, so I think that kind of puts a pretty hard cap on Valbrace being a $1 mobile game. You are climbing upward though, and literally everything will kill you. Runs are very fast, they're very chaotic. I do wish that the power-up system was just a little bit more robust. A lot of the abilities end up feeling really similar, but for an arcade-style game, it's hard to go wrong, and it is a lot of fun just watching someone play and instantly dying. You can do a lot worse for $1. Waldorf's journey is very comparable to Jump King, except that you're a walrus, and you might be wondering, how is that possible? You should be really heavy and bloaty, and you kind of are, but because you are inside of a dream, Waldorf can launch himself into the air and flap his little flippers like wings. You're managing stamina, you're picking up shells for upgrades. The overall level is randomly generated, so you never quite know what's ahead. That can make every leap of faith really tense and also really rewarding. There's also a PvP brawl mode, which is so chaotic and hilarious that you 100% need to check it out. It's possibly a $3 game, but I think that the overall length of the campaign, despite its randomization, probably puts it a little closer to $1. I'm being conservative here. So, fun fact about Devolution, the developers of UFO 50 made a game called Diabolica, which is like the prototype version of this, but it came out like decades and decades ago. You can find it on Internet Archive. Really fascinating. Devolution is a lot like Mousetrap, the board game. If anyone even remembers that, I really hope you do. You're assembling all these pieces on a board that interact with each other, and that's how you clear the enemies. It is pretty fun making a big Rube Goldberg machine and just having at it, seeing your zany creations come to life. It can also be really frustrating when you're off by one tile that you thought that you double-checked, and because of it, you lose the game instantly, and you've got a pretty long run that just went down the drain. For that reason, it's funny to say, but Devolution is either best when it's extremely fast-paced, like speed chess, or like the game AtTactics I talked about earlier, or when it's played extremely slow and very methodically, where you're taking your time to double-check and triple-check every single piece placement. I personally personally don't find this game to be that much fun, but I think for $1, and even for free if you want to play the original prototype Diabolica, it's really hard to go wrong. PinGolf is pinball golf. I cannot believe that that's not a more common mashup. You've got all these levels, you're trying your best to score in the lowest amount of streaks possible. There's a fun dunk mechanic when your ball's up in the air, which can be a little bit more dynamic than you might expect. But overall, this is easily one of the most mobile games in all of UFO 50. It can be a lot of fun in short bursts, but it doesn't really have a lot of depth. Ninpek is pretty cool. This is an actual auto-scroller, which is such an old way of playing. It's a lot like some of those older Mario levels where you have no control over the speed of the stage. What's most fun about this game is how fluid your movement is, and although your shurikens don't go super far, you do feel extremely skilled in your ability to master these areas. There's lots of little secrets to pick up, lots of points to find, and a little pro tip for you: if you die, your ghost can actually fire a little laser beam, so that can help you clear some enemies out while you make your way back onto the stage. It's short, it's cute, it's fun, it's definitely $1. The Big Bell Race is the final game in the Campanella series. This just feels like a multiplayer game that should have been included for free in one of those modes. Don't get me wrong, it is a lot of fun piloting the ship in a race setting. The power-ups are interesting, the laps are pretty fun, but overall, I do think it could have easily been bundled into something else. So I'm gonna put it at $1. Camouflage is short, cute, and sweet. It is a stealth puzzle game. You play as a little chameleon. Everything under the sun can eat you alive. The levels are fun little puzzles where you have to figure out the right order of operations to stay hidden from these predators. I had a lot of fun figuring out just how you pull off all of the bonus items as well. It's a little too short to rank higher than $1, but there is a lot of fun here, especially in optimizing your routes. I think it's kind of cute that the campaign has branching paths, and the games most similar to it are maybe Invisible Incorporated on Steam or Mark of the Ninja. Finally, we've got Combatants, and this is going to be your game that's kind of like Age of Empires, a StarCraft-style RTS game, but it's 8-bit. The enemy ants you play against are so much stronger than you that it's up to you to develop good tactics and overwhelm them. But in practice, it ends up being really clunky. The AI just doesn't work half the time, and I often felt like my best winning plays were exploiting the pixel distance between enemies, which doesn't really feel like fun. It feels more like cheating or exploitation. I like the concept of Combatants quite a bit, but overall, it is not that exciting. It's probably the only game I consider to be a true whiff in the entire collection. And hey, we had to get to 49 other games to get there. So there we go. We've got all 50 games ranked by how much money I think they could charge, and I added them up. I swear to you, I did not intend this to be the case, but I added them up, and the grand total is $250, which is exactly 10 times the amount of money that you pay for UFO 50. Again, this game is on Steam. Now it's physical on Switch. I think it is the best game of 2024. It is an all-time 10 out of 10. There are so many quality games within it. As always, I'm Scoutmaster Demi. Thanks for watching. I'm excited for the Mega Man Star Force collection that's coming out soon, but I'm also working on my indie game backlog as well, so do let me know what other games you're excited about, especially in the year 2026. I'd love to play some hot new indies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around the camp.